Hello and welcome everybody to APUS Style Sports Center. We will be covering 1920 to 1945. The 1920s have been long remembered as the Roaring Twenties, an era of unprecedented affluence best remembered through the cultural artifacts generated by its new mass consumption economy. A Ford Model T in every driveway, Amos and Andy on the radio, the first talking motion pictures at the cinema, baseball hero Babe Ruth in the ballpark, and celebrity pilot Charles Lindbergh on the front page of every newspaper. As a soaring stock market minted millionaires by the thousands, young Americans in the nation's teeming cities rejected traditional social mores by embracing a modern urban culture of freedom through drinking illegally in speakeasies, dancing provocatively to the Charleston, and listening to the sexy rhythms of jazz music. The 1920 census revealed for the first time in United States history a majority of Americans living in cities. Still, throughout the decade, well over 40% of the country's population resided on farms and in tiny rural communities, and down on the farm, the 1920s were anything but roaring. For American farmers, the Great Depression began not with the stock market crash in 1929, but with the collapse of agricultural prices in 1920. Thus, the entire decade of the 1920s was a time of poverty and crushing indebtedness, leading to the ever-rising foreclosures of family farms. More than 90% of American farms lacked electricity, and the proportion of farms with access to a telephone actually decreased over the course of the decade. Their antagonism toward the perceived cultural excess of the Roaring Twenties fueled a political backlash that allowed a resurgent Ku Klux Klan, anti-black as always, but now also anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, anti-Semitic, anti-evolution, anti-drinking, and anti-sex, to take over several state governments. The story of the 1920s is thus embodied no more by Henry Ford or Louis Armstrong than it is by Ed Jackson, Ku Klux Klansman, and the governor of Indiana. The 1920s roared with a clash of civilizations as Americans struggled to reconcile the prosperous modernity of the cities with the impoverished traditionalism of the country. The Great Depression was the largest and most significant economic depression to affect not only America but also the world. The stock market crash on October 29, 1929, is cited as the beginning of the Great Depression. Herbert Hoover was president when the crash occurred, but felt that the government should not become overly involved in helping individuals dealing with economic troubles. However, this changed with the election of Franklin Roosevelt. He worked to create numerous programs through his New Deal to help affect those worst by depression. And we have a special treat for you today. Here we have the top 10 programs as chosen by experts of the New Deal. Kicking us off at number 10, we have the Works Progress Administration, which was created in 1935 as the largest New Deal agency. The WPA impacted millions of Americans. It provided jobs across the nation, and because of it, numerous roads, buildings, and other projects were completed. Next up at number 9, we have the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was established in 1933 to develop the economy in the Tennessee Valley region, which had been hit extremely hard by the Great Depression. The TVA was and is a federally owned corporation that works in this region to this very day. It is the largest public provider of electricity in the United States. Coming in at number 8, we have the Social Security Act, which was designed to combat the widespread poverty among senior citizens. The government program provided income to retired wage earners. The program has become one of the most popular government programs and is funded by current wage earners and their employers. Next up at 7 is the Public Works Administration, which was a program created to provide economic stimulus and jobs during the Great Depression. The PWA was designed to create public works and continued until the U.S. ramped up wartime production for World War II. National Recovery Act comes in at number 6, which was designed to bring the interests of the working class Americans and business together. Through hearings and government intervention, the hope was to balance the needs of all involved in the economy. Coming in at number 5 is the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which was created in 1933 to assist in the refinancing of homes across the nation. The Federal Security Agency comes in at number 4. It was established in 1939 and had the responsibility for several important government titles. Until it was abolished in 1953, it administered Social Security, federal education funding, and food and drug safety. Coming in at number 3, we have the Federal Housing Administration, which was a government agency created to combat the housing crisis of the Great Depression. The large number of unemployed workers combined with the banking crisis created a situation in which the banks recalled loans. The FHA was designed to regulate mortgages and housing conditions. The Civil Works Administration comes in at number 2. It was created in 1933 to create jobs for the unemployed. Its focus on high-paying jobs in the construction arena resulted in a much greater expense to federal government than originally anticipated. The CWA ended in 1934 in large part due to opposition to its costs. And at number 1, we have the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was created in 1933 by Franklin D. Roosevelt to combat unemployment. This work relief program had the desired effect and provided jobs for many Americans during the Great Depression. The CCC was responsible for building many public works and created structures and trails in parks across the nation. Through the troubled years of the late 1930s, Americans did everything they possibly could to avoid being drawn into these growing conflicts abroad. In the end, staying out of World War II proved impossible. By the middle of 1941, President Roosevelt had committed American ships to an undeclared naval war with Germany in the North Atlantic, and on December 7, 1941, any question of America's further neutrality in the conflict ended with a devastating surprise attack by the Japanese against the American naval station at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Once committed to the war, Americans committed themselves to achieving total victory on two fronts: victory over fascist Italy and Nazi Germany in Europe, as well as victory over Imperial Japan in the Pacific. Victory did eventually come. It came in Europe in May 1945 and in Asia 3 months later, but it came with a tremendous cost. Worldwide, an estimated 70 million people lost their lives, the majority of them innocent civilians, including 6 million European Jews ruthlessly murdered by Nazis in modern history's worst genocide known as the Holocaust. World War II was, quite simply, the most deadly and destructive conflict in human history, let alone American history.